All right, thanks for joining everybody. We're at now 1 minute past the hour, so we'll get started. Thanks for coming to our webinar today. We're going to talk about Atlassian Cloud Migration Strategies. Provide a quick agenda for the session here. So start off with a quick introduction, talk about the presenters today. From there, we're going to talk about Avant, give you a quick introduction into us, who we are as an organization and what we do. We're going to then go into our cloud migration considerations. So we're going to talk about what you need to know to be successful in the cloud migration and a little bit of background on why we're here as well. Following that, we'll go through the 5 different approaches to cloud migrations. And these aren't the only 5, but they're the 5 most common approaches. Talk about the pros, cons, timelines, tooling, and recommendations. And then finally, we will close it off with a quick approach, which approach to take and give you guys access to a self-assessment complexity review tool, so that if you're looking at migrating your instance, you can have a quick review and get a sense of where your migration might reside within the realm of complexity. A little bit of housekeeping here to quickly get started. So if you have any questions, feel free to post those into the chat. We'll reserve some time at the end for a quick Q&A. And also we are going to be recording this session, so there will be a video that we'll send out to all attendees after the webinar is over. So quick introduction to the speaker. It is myself. We had originally intended for a guest speaker, but unfortunately due to a family emergency, they weren't able to show. So today you're stuck with me. I am the president and CEO of Avant. My name is Ryan Hanna. I founded the Atlassian practice with Avant back in 2013. Since then, I've had the opportunity to work very closely with our customers from the early stages of projects through to project completion. I've been working daily with the Atlassian products over the past 8 years, and I've even earned my certifications in the tools in both Jira Service Management and Jira Project Administration. Prior to working Avant, I worked in large enterprise financial management roles, earning my Chartered Professional Accounting designation, and I had a focus on business management and process improvement. I enjoy spending time with my family at our cabin and playing guitar in my spare time. And believe it or not, I do almost have every guitar in every room in my house, so a fun little fact there about me. So now a little bit about our company, Avant. We're proudly based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, with locations throughout the country. We are an innovative information technology integration and workflow solutions company. So our expertise stems from over 25 years of experience in software consulting and software development. Our team is passionate about software development tools, development processes, and methodologies. And most importantly, we're passionate about sharing our expertise with our clients and being part of their growth and evolution. As an enterprise Atlassian solution partner, Avant has gained extensive experience working with, implementing, and supporting the Atlassian tools for a broad range of customers, varying from large enterprises to innovative startups across a wide range of industries. We're highly trained and committed to providing a full range of Atlassian support services. These services include license management services. So we are an authorized license reseller of Atlassian products. Application administration, so full configuration of the various Atlassian application products themselves, whether it's quick customizations or full implementations with teams looking to onboard new products. Migration support, so similar to what we're here talking about today, helping customers migrate to the Atlassian products or moving from one version of the Atlassian product to another. Manage hosting. So in addition to migrations, we do manage cloud environments for our customers and support their server and data center installs. And we also do a little bit of custom add-on development. So we have a number of apps in the marketplace, and we do some custom development for various customers. With regards to the solution areas that we work within, as Atlassian users, I'm assuming that you guys are all very aware that the products fit quite a broad range of business areas. So these are just some examples of the types of business solutions that we help customers implement: IT and asset management, facilities management, project and portfolio management, procurement, collaboration, QA and test management, enterprise service management, software development, and DevOps. Just very quickly, we want to, highlight some of the great customers that we've had the opportunity of working with over the last 9 years that we've been at this. Lots of small startups all the way up to large enterprises. And each one of our customers has, unique challenges that we've had the opportunity to learn from and participate in their success. And we wouldn't be up here without them. So we definitely appreciate the support that we've received and the opportunity to work with their teams. Okay, so now that we've talked about us, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the cloud migration considerations. So what are the things that we need to know, and how do we need to be, and what we need to be successful with our cloud migration? So first off, why are we here? A little bit of play on the time of the year we're here. But the reality is that Atlassian has announced the end of life for the server-based products. So they're choosing to simplify their self-managed solutions in order to set their customers up for more long-term success. What Atlassian found was that by dividing their resources between server, data center, and cloud, it was hindering their ability to innovate faster. So by focusing their resources, Atlassian believes that they'll be able to innovate much faster and provide ultimately better opportunities for their customers with their more streamlined application set. Atlassian continues to hear from a growing majority of customers that they need to work with Atlassian products in the cloud. And that really is where the desire of their customers seems to be. At the end of the day, Atlassian is making this decision in order to better serve their customers. Today, their time and effort is spread across 3 deployment platforms, constraining resources, limiting advancement. In order to address this, Atlassian is simplifying their offerings so they can focus and invest on growing their products. So very quickly, talk about the timeline and how we got here and what some of the important dates are to keep in mind. So as most of you probably recall, February 2nd, 2021 was the first date where we had an impact on this announcement. And that was when Atlassian stopped selling their server products. Upcoming February 2nd, 2022, Atlassian will be no longer providing upgrades or downgrades for their server products. So this is the next major date that our customers need to be aware of and prepare for. So it's an important timeline to be aware of, as if you are planning to continue to use your server-based products for the next year or 2 years, you'll want to anticipate what your user requirements are going to be to ensure that you have the right licenses. As after this date, if you need to add more users to your instance, your only options will be upgrading to data center or migrating to the cloud. The next date to note is February 2nd, 2023. So on this date, no new server marketplace apps will be sold. So after this time, you'll not be able to buy new apps. So at that point, you are stuck with the functionality that you have with the existing server instance and the existing server apps that you have. And last but not least, the final date, February 2nd, 2024, Atlassian will be ending support for their server products. Now, something important to keep in mind with this, though, is that the server products are perpetual use licenses. So while this means they will be ending support, it does not mean that the products will stop working. It just means that customers will not be able to get bug fixes and security patches for those products. Something customers often ask us about in evaluating their options post the announcement is, should we go to data center or we go to cloud? And oftentimes the question is, why migrate to the cloud? And we wanted to highlight a few of the advantages of cloud, which there are many, as I believe most people are aware of. But these are just a few of the key ones we wanted to call out with the Atlassian Cloud product. So first one being automatic updates. Today, oftentimes organizations, they either have to spend significant amounts of time in order to keep their Atlassian applications up to date and secure with all the latest security patches. Or more often, and what we see is that they don't actually have the time to do these things. So they have instances that are not up to date, not secure. They're not getting the latest, greatest features. They're not performing at the ultimate. So the biggest benefit that we find and we see with going to the cloud is that you don't have to worry about this. So the responsibility to maintain these environments is now moved to the Atlassian team, and they take care of all of that work for you. Even better than that, you get the latest and greatest features. and you don't have to do any additional work in order to get it. This next one we really want to call out is the improved admin and security. Atlassian is investing significantly in their cloud products. And as the usage grows and as the customer base grows and as the risks grow within the ecosystem, Atlassian is having to invest more and more into the security of their products. Without the security in their products, they wouldn't have the trust in the customers, and it's just not a viable business for them. So we know that in order for them to grow their business, they're going to need to ensure that customers have the ultimate security in their products, keeping their customers' data safe and protected from external risks. The other benefit here is that this is one other set of applications that organizations no longer have to worry about the security component of. So you can, in addition to the maintenance of those applications, you now have Atlassian, which is a multi-billion-dollar company focused on and looking after the security of your applications instead of worrying about your network and your security teams having to take care of those environments for you. So a couple of considerations when moving to the cloud. A big one to highlight is that cloud is a different product. These are just a few small examples, but even more important than some of these is it's a different user experience. So the UI looks different, it feels different. While the underlying functionality is the same, you still have projects, you still have issues, you still have workflows. There are a lot of different differences between the server and the cloud-based products. Another item to highlight is that the billing works differently. And while this might seem small, it can be a big adjustment for some people, not just in how you actually contract your cloud invoices. You don't work within your my.atlassian.com nearly as much. And in fact, that's going to be going away in the coming months. But even the model itself is different. So where your server products were perpetual use licenses, where you would purchase annual maintenance and support, with the cloud products, it's a subscription model. And you have a choice between monthly or annual. In addition, there are different tiers that you have. So you have the free version, the standard version, and you have premium and enterprise versions of Jira and Confluence. So the great news, though, is that these additional versions provide additional benefits and additional features to organizations that weren't necessarily there on the previous cloud or server-based products. Something else to consider with the migrations as well is that migrations can be quite complex and they can take time. We're going to talk a little bit more about this complexity in the next couple of slides, but just quick highlight, marketplace apps are a major factor in contributing to this complexity. Not all marketplace apps have cloud equivalent apps. And even ones that do, sometimes the features and functionality aren't exactly the same between the server version and the cloud version. The next piece to talk about is the migration tooling itself. So in some cases, the migration tooling does not handle all data elements to move from the server versions to the cloud versions. As an example, advanced roadmaps and Jira Service Management, up until very recently, the migration tooling, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant did not handle. But the good news is that Atlassian is investing significantly in the Cloud Migration Assistant tooling, both the Jira and Confluence tooling, and they are expanding their capabilities on a very regular basis. So there are now beta versions available to assist with both advanced roadmaps, Jira Service Management, and even apps. So the apps that once had to be handled completely separate and independently, oftentimes requiring partners or clients to have to work with each individual vendor, or even in some cases come up with custom migration tooling. That's now starting to be bundled into the Cloud Migration Assistance, which is going to streamline and simplify the migration process a lot. So this is also where I'll highlight where partners can be of assistance. This is what we do day in and day out. We work with the Atlassian products, and over the last 4 to 5 years, as the push to cloud has been increasing. We've been had a bit of an early start, we'll say, in helping organizations migrate to the cloud. And with Atlassian now increasing their investment in the support services and the tooling, it's becoming that much of a better process and that much more of a repeatable process and scalable process. So now it's not just the smallest of organizations moving to the cloud. It's large enterprise organizations with complex data that are actually able to move to the cloud. So Atlassian solution partners are, invested in this process. We have the experience, and at times we also have access to be able to escalate and elevate things within Atlassian in order to ensure that the right eyes are on the projects in order to make these migration projects a success with our customers. All right, so talk about cloud migration complexity a little bit here. So no two businesses are alike, and this can have a heavy influence on the time, resources, and effort required to complete a migration to the Atlassian cloud. Our experience tells us that an average cloud migration can take anywhere from 3 to 12 months, and in some cases, even longer than that, depending on the complexity. Some of the factors that come into play are the size. So this is really the amount of data and the number of users. What apps are in use, including all critical apps you have, whether they're available in the cloud. Do we have to identify alternatives, or do you have to find additional functionality or alternative functionality and reconfigure that functionality into it? Customizations, so things like custom fields and non-Atlassian integrations and custom apps. We've seen a lot of things in the 8 years that we've been doing this, and there are a lot of people that took advantage of the data model of the server products to be able to create custom integrations and their own custom apps. Right? Not everybody has sourced out apps from the App Store. Lots of organizations have built their own custom solutions and deployed it because they could. So that can add definitely to the complexity. Number of products also contributes to the complexity. So the more products you have, more complex the migration will be. Consolidation. So if you're consolidating multiple sites, this will also add to complexity, as you have to take into consideration the data shape on both sides of those consolidations, the apps, and make sure that everything is going to work seamlessly. So this is whether you have multiple server or a server in a data center instance, or a server in a existing cloud instance, or even in cases multiple cloud instances, which even that process is changing as Atlassian is introducing their cloud merging capabilities. And lastly, the other big area to consider is our user management and security needs. So user management is different in the cloud than it is on server. There is some relationship there, but it is certainly different, and you have to be mindful of those differences. So the need for Atlassian access, numbers of anonymous users, inactive users, and use of multiple identity providers. It's not uncommon for us for large instances to have large numbers of old or inactive users that we have to be mindful of through those migrations. Organizations that have multiple integrations with various Active Directories. So these things all definitely contribute to the complexity of a migration. And all of these items, and as you're embarking on this journey, you're going to hear this word come up more and more. All of these items contribute to what is being defined as an organization's data shape. So this is how Atlassian is defining the overall complexity of an organization's digital real estate. So this combines all these different factors to give it almost a score or a visualization of how complex an organization's data is, and that helps prepare and plan for the actual migration itself. So next, I thought it would be good to touch on the actual migration process itself. So there are a number of different ways that you can go about completing the migrations, lots of different strategies, which are what we're going to talk about today. But overall, the process itself, end to end, is broken down in this manner. So first, in the assessment phase, this is where we typically will go in and audit your current server and cloud licenses. We assess the data size and complexity, or the data shape, as we discussed. We do an audit of your apps to determine what needs you have. So which apps do you have today? What apps do you need in the future? We do a review of compliance and security. So this is an important step to ensure that not only are the teams directly using the applications want to migrate, but can you migrate based on your company's compliance and security requirements? At this point, we may also do a cost assessment, and this might include a budgeting phase to ensure that the move to the cloud has been considered from a financial perspective. There are costs. If you're going to engage a partner in order to migrate, there's going to be migration costs. Even if you're not going to engage a partner to migrate, there are internal costs that would be incurred through resource time and availability. But then in addition to that, there are different costs on the licensing side. So as we talked about, the cloud process, the cloud licensing model is different from server. So you want to be aware of what those cost differences are. In some cases, we work with clients to do an ROI to understand really what the total cost of ownership is between your server and cloud licenses. On the surface, sometimes cloud can look more expensive because the pure licensing cost might be more. But we often find when organizations dive in and look at the top cost of the infrastructure that's supporting, the cost of their resource time to support the applications, with the total cost of ownership starts to move in the favor of cloud. And especially when that means that organizations are able to redeploy those resources and have them focus on, their core business competencies. In addition to budgeting costs, conduct a legal review, so that comes back into our discussions around compliance and security needs. We assess the cloud product, so we want to figure out which cloud product is going to be the right one for you, which cloud tier is going to be the right one for you, which one meets your need, whether it's standard, premium, or enterprise. And we complete a final assessment of all the apps to determine exactly what cloud apps are going to be needed. From there, that's when we transitioned to the actual planning phase. And this is done, as you can see, a little bit of overlap between the assessment and the plan. So the planning phase, while it's fairly short, is often one of the most important components of the projects, in our opinion, to make sure that you've identified all the risks and all the major milestones and timelines that you need to define in order to ensure you have a successful migration. So typically in this phase, we would, by then the organization has committed to the migration. They've agreed, they've budgeted, they're all signed up. The key stakeholders are bought in. At that point, we sign up for our cloud trials. We can take advantage of the number of the promotions from Atlassian with free cloud migration trials. Typically, we'll choose the plan. And then that's when we start to decide on the strategy, which is what we're going to talk about in more detail today. So what is the right migration strategy? What is the migration tooling going to look like? And then from there, we're able to develop the final plan and build out those timelines. As we're going to talk about the strategy today, I'm going to give you a little bit more of an overview of the remainder of this, but the bulk of what we're going to talk about today is defining those strategies. So really focused on that assessment and planning phase. Okay. So once the plan is done, that's when we move into testing. This is where the bulk of the time and effort, as you can see by the size of it, is spent. This is where we start actually migrating the data into a test environment. So this is moving all the Jira data, moving all the app data. From there, we get the teams involved and they do a thorough UAT. We're also building out the runbooks in preparation of the migration itself. The goal of the test phase is in order to make sure that the process is repeatable. And then once we get a repeatable process that we're able to do multiple times, we focus on scalability. So ensuring that it can be done within a reasonable time frame, so not to have an extremely long outage that would have a significant impact on end users. Once the test phase is complete, that's when we transition to the actual migration itself, typically handled over a predefined outage window as short as possible. From there, the launch, and then optimize. So this is ultimately when we hand it off to the clients and we're able to help them transition into their new cloud environment and take advantage of the latest and greatest features that come with the cloud product. All right, and we're going to take a quick pause here. We do have some gift cards that we're going to hand out today. I'm going to ask that Adam, he's been keeping track of all of our attendees here. He's going to do a random draw to identify one of our lucky attendees here.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm just going to run my quick little attendee randomizer tool. And our first Amazon gift card winner is Scott Chung. We will be sending that out to you via emails. Congratulations.
Great, thanks, Adam. All right, we'll get back into this here. Okay, so what are these 5 approaches? We keep talking about the different strategies and approaches to migrating to cloud. So now we're going to dive in. And the first one we're going to talk about is the lift and shift. So approach number 1, often known as the Big Bang approach. So what are the pros of a lift and shift? Well, first off, everything is migrated at once. So in this model, we take everything, we pick it up and we move it over. It's typically provides shorter timelines depending on the size and complexity of the instance, in that kind of 1 to 6 month time range. Now, keep in mind, there are restrictions on when this can be done, but with instances that this is a valid solution for, it can definitely be done within that kind of 1 to 6 timeline range. The pro is that simpler approaches typically lend to lower costs all around, lower partner costs, lower internal costs, whatever costs that are being incurred. And the last but not least, the biggest pro here is an easy rollback in the event of a failure. So, if you're struggling to get that repeatable process and you still move forward in a migration, which we definitely don't recommend doing, in the event that there is a failure, the rollback process can be quite simple. So as long as you're working from a test environment, it's simply just a matter of keeping your existing users in your existing server instance. And there are no real changes other than the outage that you had scheduled for those customers. Some of the cons of the lift and shift approach, where it was a pro that everything gets to migrate at the same time. On the flip side, it could also be a con. You have to move everything simultaneously. So this can be more complex. It can result in increased downtime because of the complexity of the environment that you have, depending on the volume of data, et cetera. There can be more extensive testing, including the UAT. So if it's a large instance with many different teams, many different apps, lots of data, the timeline for completing the migration can take longer if you're trying to complete it in a single go. And the time for testing can be more intensive as well, because you have to have all teams go in and do thorough testing through the testing phase to ensure that everything that should be there ultimately gets there. The other negative is that, it doesn't give you the opportunity to clean things up. So, as many of you probably have old Jira instances, much like we do, you accumulate lots of stuff, good and bad. So, this doesn't provide as much of an opportunity to go through and clean up that data. So whatever you have in your server environment, you're going to be moving it over. So this may mean that you in the future have to take care of those post-migration cleanup response activities once you're actually moved into the cloud. So what are some of the tooling options? So this is going to be an important part as we're discussing this. So with the lift and shift approach, you do have options in the tooling, which is good. So you have the option of using either the Jira or Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant, which is a specific tool provided by Atlassian, or you can use the Jira Confluence site import approach. Big difference between the two is that when you do a site import approach, you overwrite all the data in the target instance. So if this is a situation where you have an existing cloud instance, you would not likely be choosing the lift and shift model using a site import, but you could do the lift and shift using the Cloud Migration Assistant, as the Cloud Migration Assistant does not overwrite all of the data in your target cloud environment. So the good news is with this approach, you do have options between those tools in order to determine which one works best with the data shape of your instance. So when is the lift and shift recommended? It's recommended when you have a quick move. If you have requirements to move to the cloud quickly, this is often an approach that works well. It's recommended when critical apps are available as cloud equivalents. So making sure that those apps do exist. It's also recommended when there's no need or desire to clean up the data prior to the migration. So if you have a relatively new server instance, a relatively simple instance, there's not the need for a lot of data cleanup. This is a great approach. And when collaboration between teams only takes place on a single instance without external dependencies. And lastly, you don't need to migrate JSM or portfolio. So as we talked about, you do need to migrate JSM and portfolio. So as we mentioned previously, the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant tooling did not handle advanced roadmaps or formally portfolio or Jira Service Management. Now, with the latest beta releases, that is becoming an option, however. So just to summarize with the lift and shift approach, really it's focused on smaller, more simple instances where you don't have an existing cloud environment and when you don't have really a lot of cleanup activities that are required. All right. Second approach we're going to talk about is the optimize and shift. So very similar to the first one. However, we're going to spend a little bit more time and clean things up in order to simplify the migration itself. So the pros, very similar to the lift and shift, we're only migrating, but we're also only migrating the data that is needed. So we're only moving what is important to us. So we're taking the time to go in and clean up and get rid of old and archived data. This will often have a shorter migration downtime, leading to reduced partner costs, shorter migration timeline overall, also leading to reduced partner costs, and it's more simple to navigate for users once in the cloud. So when your end users migrate to the cloud, if they're in an unoptimized or a cleaned up environment, typically it's going to be a much better user experience for them. It's also important to highlight here where if you have a large complex environment where a phased approach, which we'll talk about in the next couple of slides, doesn't work and you need to move everything at the same time, the complexities of large environments can be the data itself and the apps. And the time it takes to move those over. So in those situations, we definitely recommend going with the optimized approach. So spending a little bit more time upfront, cleaning up, getting rid of some of that problematic data in order to streamline and simplify the migration itself. Some of the cons: additional planning and work to determine what users and data and cleanup is required. So with the lift and shift, number one, you just take it all and move it over. It's simple. But with this approach, it does take a little bit of time to think about what cleanup is required. And that isn't always necessarily able to be done at an admin level. You will likely have to engage some of the business users and the end users of the application to understand what actually needs to be moved, where are the apps, what apps are being used, which ones can we get rid of, so on and so forth. And what tooling options do we have? So similar to the lift and shift, you have some options with the tooling. So you have the options of using the Jira and Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant tooling, or completing the site import, with the caveat that if you're using the site import, again, you are overwriting any of the data in the target cloud instance. So when would you recommend using the optimize and shift approach? Typically, this is going to be when you want to, again, move within a single window of time. You don't want to be having your teams working in multiple instances. You have the ability to go in and clean up and optimize. So you have the time available to you, or you have the resources available, or you have a partner that can help out in cleaning up the availability. And lastly, apps are available in the cloud. So again, you want to make sure that all the same apps are available in the cloud in order to be able to do so. Okay. Next approach is the phased approach. So this is breaking up the migration into manageable batches. So doing your migration in multiple steps as opposed to a single big bang lift and shift type approach. Pros are phased user onboarding and change management. So it's not as much change for your organization. You can break that up into teams or business units. They have the opportunity to move over to the new environment, get used to the new environment, because as you recall, we did mention cloud is different. It does have a different look and feel. So if you have training requirements and you have a large user base, this could be a good approach. Reduce single downtime. So the downtime per migration is going to be less than trying to do a single large migration in itself. So having multiple outages might be easier for your organization if there are multiple shorter outages, so less overall potential impact. This also allows for data cleanup and optimization over time. So you can selectively choose which teams or which projects or which spaces are going to be migrated, leaving behind those where you want the teams to be able to do some of the cleanup activities in order to optimize the migration. And it provides more time to gather iterative feedback from stakeholders to apply for future migration prep phases. And this is an important one. As we mentioned earlier, cloud migrations can be complex, but the more you go through them, the more you learn about the processes. So as you've completed different migrations for the different components or phases of this, each additional migration is going to have lessons learned that can be shared with it and utilized by the future migrations themselves. Some of the cons, users working across two platforms simultaneously. So obviously, if you still have your server environment existing, some users are there, you're going to lose some of the collaboration capabilities. Typically, these phased approaches do result in longer timelines, 6 to 12 months or longer, depending on the size of the migration itself. They can be managed, they can be difficult to manage as well. And the migration team ultimately is working on the migration for a longer period of time. So it is a longer duration. Management of multiple deployments required until migration is complete. So one of the big benefit of the lift and shift is you can move everything off of those server environments and then you can decommission those in server environments. Whereas with these phased approaches, you're going to be administering your cloud environment, while less on the system level administration. There is still administration, but you're also administering both at the system and the infrastructure level on the server environment. Fixing links in Jira and Confluence can be difficult between cross-linked instances. So if you do have links between those instances that maintain, that starts to add a significant amount of complexity, especially between your Jira and Confluence instances. Yeah. So there's a number of complexities and cons from the phased approach to keep in mind. And really, we look to this model when organizations are very large, complex, and there's time required in order to clean up an instance, and they need to move certain teams over. So what tooling is required? Less options here, as you'll see. We don't have the ability to do the site import with the exception of the first phase. So technically you could do a site import on the first phase. Technically not a recommended approach because it will still bring everything over. So essentially you're doing a full migration anyways. But for the most part, with the phased approaches, you are going to be using the Jira and Confluence migration assistance. And where and when is this approach recommended? First, when you can't migrate in a single migration window due to a very large or complex data shape, or when there's long downtime is not feasible due to internal business drivers. And lastly, when critical apps are not yet available in the cloud. So if you have certain apps that are being in use by certain teams in certain projects, and they have to stay on server for a period of time, this is one of the strategies instead of abandoning functionality if a certain team needs to move off. Okay. All right, we're going to take another quick pause here for our second draw. I'll bring Adam back to identify the next lucky winner.
Okay, let's run our quick randomizer tool again. Click that button a couple of times. And our winner is Justice Brooks. Congratulations. We'll send your Amazon card out via email once the webinar is complete.
Great, congratulations. All right. Approach number 4, continuous, otherwise known as a granular phase. So I think this was an important one to highlight, very similar to phase, but a much more granular approach, team by team, project by project, space by space, sorry. So the pros of this approach is really phased user onboarding and change management. So just building upon the pro from the last one, this is that much more granular of a model. So it's working with each individual team can allow for a lot more streamlined or simplified change management approach. So many organizations, struggle with change of this nature. If you need to get users trained up on the new environment, this can be a good approach. Furthermore, it also reduces the downtime, of the individual outages. As we're moving less data potentially, that downtime will ultimately be less. It again allows for data cleanup and optimization over time and provides more time to gather iterative feedback from stakeholders to apply future migrations. So very similar to approach number 3 that we talked about. What are the cons? And as you'll see here, page 1 of 2, there are many cons to this approach. This is an approach we try to avoid in most cases, although it is something to be considerate of when assessing and coming up with a plan. So overall extended migration time frame. So this is going to take the longest amount of time to move your instance over. End users split across both platforms. So administration both your cloud and on-prem during the transition period. So the same as approach number 3, but just in even longer duration. Longer overall migration timeline may lead to increased costs due to continuous planning, testing, performing production migrations, post-migration checks, post-migration fixes, and end user onboarding. So, due to the overall length of this migration approach, there's just inherently more costs, right? You're migrating more often, you're doing tests more often, you're doing UATs more often, you're doing cleanup more often. While it is at a smaller level, just the overall duration and the elapsed time takes so much longer. Dependencies must be mapped out very carefully. So understanding what's being moved, what is its relationship with other data within the systems is a very careful planning exercise, and it's fraught with risks, quite frankly. It's very difficult to fix links after migrating when only some Confluence spaces or Jira projects are migrated. So if anything does get missed, and there are links that are missed or broken, and they're trying to refer back to the old instances, this can be very complex and very costly and timely to fix. Migration tooling is also changing at a quick pace. So this, while it's a pro, it improves things. It can be difficult to reproduce a process. So because you're dragging this migration process out over such a long period of time, as migration tooling changes, your teams are constantly having to learn new models, new approaches, learning to work with different tools, and it just really extends the overall duration and effort required to complete the migration. What else we got on page 2? Rollback efforts become extremely difficult. Tooling does not yet bring over custom fields, technical risks and complexity, products on cloud and on-prem simultaneously. There's IP address concerns. Again, the collaboration drops off significantly between those environments. So just overall, a very complex strategy. There are times we will say that customers feel strongly that this is a required approach, and they have very valid business reasons, but it certainly does increase the complexity of the migration itself. And similar to approach number 3, the only real option here is to work with the Jira Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant tool. Okay. So when is this recommended? Again, critical apps are not yet available in cloud. So you have teams that are using apps and it's critical to their business functions. If it's not available in the cloud, but for some reason other teams need to migrate, this is an option. If using Cloud Migration Assistance, customer is able to commit freezing all configurations for the duration of the testing of the production phases. This is a tough one, but it is necessary that organizations are freezing configurations. So if you're able to, lock things down in your server environment, that is a hard requirement. So, and again, just a note here, this approach really is not generally recommended. Some might ask why we even bring it up. There are, I think the reason why it's been presented and why we talk about it is because customers do ask about it. They are curious about it, where if they have these types of unique scenarios, that we do want to make sure we're going through and evaluating these thoroughly to really understand the pros and cons. And the last approach we're going to talk about today is approach number 5, which is oddly not discussed as often as I figured it would be, but starting fresh. The not totally nuclear option, we call it. So this is really leaving your server in an archive state and bringing your users and workflows into the cloud. So leaving the data behind and starting over with a fresh new instance. So what are the pros? Very few migration details, time required, if any. So, you can selectively migrate some data elements, or you could migrate nothing at all. So very little from a migration effort. And the other pro is, you can still keep that server environment up for reference purposes or for historical archiving purposes. So it's very simple to get up and running. Some other pros are that you've got a fresh, clean environment. So if your old instance was not optimized, if you didn't like the project configurations and workflows, this is an opportunity to start fresh. Some of the cons is that you don't have access to the data, and any of the information that was configured in the old instance is not brought over. All of your workflows, configurations. So if you've invested and built out really strong processes, this may not be a recommended approach. But if you're able to rebuild some of those workflows and configurations, or if your instance was largely stock, this may be a good approach to simplify the migration process for your organization, and ultimately save a lot of money and time in doing so. And what tooling is required? None. So also the simplest model from the tooling side, unless you're looking to migrate some of the data, in which case you would use the migration assistant tools. But at that point, you might as well migrate more. So if you are considering a model where you want to start fresh and leave behind all your old data, it is definitely the simplest approach. So when do organizations consider this approach? First off, when your organization and team no longer needs the existing server data. So if you don't need any of the information in your existing Jira Confluence, this is a very valid approach. If you're starting a new team, so if it's a new business unit or a new team within the organization that doesn't have a lot of overlap with the existing teams, very valid approach. And then if you do in the future need to merge those teams, when that other team is ready to migrate, you can again merge your server instance with a cloud instance by using the Jira Cloud Migration Assistance. You want to expedite your move to the cloud. This is by far the fastest move if you don't have to bring anything over. Now, granted, that is pending what types of configurations you need to do in your new environment. So if it's a highly customized or configured environment, rebuilding that from the ground up might be more time consuming. But if it's predominantly stock, this is probably the fastest way to go. And ultimately, if you want to streamline your cloud instance and rethink the way your organization operates. And this is something we often challenge organizations with is this the right time to reimagine how you're using Jira, how you've built your workflows, how you've defined your project structures and the data models there. So it is definitely a valid option, and believe it or not, something we ask our clients more often than not, even though it results in us not getting work. It is something that I think customers should consider, and as it is something that can save time and money and simplify the process significantly for them. Okay, and we've got, I believe, one last draw here. So Adam is going to go back to his random selector and identify one other lucky participant.
Yes, sir. We're drawing our third gift card here. And push that button a couple of times once again. Winner is Alexander Mukachov. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Congratulations. And that is our gift card draw for this webinar.
Perfect. Thanks, Adam. We got a couple more slides here before the QA. So which approach is best? So how do you go about evaluating the best approach for your team? So there's a number of ways to do this. But one thing we want to highlight is the approach should be taken carefully evaluated. And you have to do this based on a number of different factors. So first off, look at the users within your organization. Assess the products that you have, the marketplace apps, the custom fields. So really the overall configuration or the overall complexity of your environment when compared to others. And also, what is your organization's capacity for downtime? And lastly, we'll highlight that we do have a complexity assessment tool that we've built. And this is a very quick assessment where you're able to plug in kind of a high level overview of what your instance looks like, how many apps you have, how many products you have, and how complex it is. And that'll give you a bit of a gauge in terms of how complex this ranks within Atlassian's overall complexity assessment for cloud migrations. And if you're interested in trying that out, you visit our website at www.avant.ca. The rest of the extension is there. It's fairly easy to find, but it's /cloud-migration-assessment, and give that a try. And then from there, the next step would be having a more detailed conversation with a partner like us to do a bit more of a deep dive and an assessment into your environment to understand the real complexity of your migration. And that is it. That brings us to the end of our slide deck here. So we've got a little bit of time left for Q&A. And I do see we've got a couple of questions here. So I'm going to head over. First question. Okay, Vivi Patro, the connectivity will do change even in lift and shift. So all the interfaces needs to be reestablished, I believe. This is also one of the challenge normally in migrations. In terms of the connectivity, I guess I'm not really sure exactly what the question is here. I think this is potentially referring to any integrations potentially, or between integrations with the Atlassian apps, in which case, yes, completely. So any integrations between your Atlassian products and third-party applications, or even other Atlassian products, those do need to be reestablished. And it is definitely any interfaces to Atlassian products. Yeah, so I think they're talking about the app links between the different products, between like Jira and Confluence, and if you've got Bitbucket and Bamboo involved or any other tools. But yes, definitely in even the lift and shift or the cloud migration assistance, you do have to reestablish those application links and make sure that they're set up and integrated with each other. Hope that answered your question. And then we've got a couple more in the chat. Let's take a look here. Oh, no questions in chat today, just a couple of thanks sent out here. So any other questions from anybody else in terms of understanding the overall strategy or potentially the overall plan and how migrations are completed? Okay. Well, with that, we'll wrap it up with an extra 4 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Congratulations to the winners of those gift cards. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our website is www.avant.ca, and we look forward to talking with everybody in the future. Have a great day. Bye now.